George Klein and Memphis Sounds. Our purpose is to keep Memphis music past, present, and future alive. We need your support to keep going. The number to call is 901-415-2833. Here's a guy who's been going for many years, legendary drummer Fluke Holland. Ladies and gentlemen, not only did he start out with Carl Perkins, but he also played drums for the legendary Johnny Cash. You were with two great legends, Fluke.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing how quick all this has happened. I look back at it, and it's 55 years now, sitting on a drum stool behind Carl Perkins and Johnny Cash. How good can it be?
You can't get much better than that. Now, Fluke, you originally once told me that you didn't play drums and Perkins was coming to Memphis. Will you pick up that story?
I just got out of high school over in Bemis, Tennessee, a little town out of Jackson. Never thought about being in the music business. I was kind of mechanically, knew about more mechanics than anything else. And I was getting into the air conditioning business.
Okay.
And Carl Perkins and his two brothers had a little band in Jackson. They just played the little clubs around, stood in the corner. And Clayton played upright bass, and JB played acoustic guitar. Back then it was rhythm guitar, now it's acoustic guitar.
Okay.
And Carl played electric guitar. And I had met them. It was from the same town. And for some reason, I don't know why, but every once in a while, they'd be doing an up-tempo song. I'd just walk up beside the upright bass, like an old song, Wine Spodiota. You've heard it a million times. And I'd just, on the curvature of the bass, sound kind of like a bongo drum. I'd keep time, wine, 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 wine. So I don't know why I did that. Then, just for another thing happened that I don't know why it happened. I was at the place, the Hilltop Inn, one Saturday night when they was getting through, and Carl said, we got an audition with Sam Phillips next Thursday morning.
At Sun Records.
At Sun Records in Memphis. Said, borrow some drums and go with us. I said, man, what would I do with drums if I borrowed them? He said, you can keep time on that bass like that. You can play drums. I don't know why I did it. I went the next day. I'd heard of a fellow in Jackson. His name was Slick Glisson. That had some drums. I go to him Sunday afternoon, tell him I want to borrow his drums and what I'm going to do. And he said, well, you can't play. What do you want these drums for? I said, well, if you let me have the drums, I'll be playing by Thursday. He let me have them. I took them out of my mom's house, and I never had seen a drum set up. So I set them up backwards, playing the bass drum with my left foot.
Yeah.
And then on Tuesday night, a little club called the Cotton Bowl down south of Jackson. We went down there and sat and played. For some reason, I could keep time. And we got in my car the next Thursday morning, drove over to Memphis, and Sam liked what he heard. We unloaded, went and sat up in the middle of the floor and did a song called Movie Mag.
I remember that, yeah.
That's the song that we did.
We got to fast forward, Fluke. Now, Carl Perkins gets a contract, does Blue Suede Shoes. You move across the street and join the Johnny Cash band. You guys go to Folsom Prison. Tell us about that Folsom Prison album with Johnny Cash.
Well, actually what happened, we'd all toured together for the next 4 or 5 years there, Elvis and John and Jerry Lee and all the guys. Then at the end of the 60s, it seemed like it was pretty well over, and I was going to retire. And got a call from John Cash. He got a big engagement, at that time, his biggest engagement, up in New York and down at Atlantic City at the Steel Pier. Wanted me to go with him for 2 weeks. And Joyce and me had just gotten married, and I was going to retire, but I went those 2 weeks, and those 2 weeks lasted until we did the last show nearly 40 years later.
Son. Fluke Holland, legendary drummer. Before we let you go, Fluke, you played on a legendary piece of music at 706 Union. It was called the $1 Million Quartet. It was Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, and Elvis Presley, and Fluke Holland was on drums. You remember that day?
Oh, I remember it very well. That was we was back in town to do Matchbox.
Yeah.
And Sam had called Jerry Lee to play piano.
Yeah.
And just in the middle of the session, John and Elvis just happened to walk in. We'd been working together for several years, and everybody was all good buddies. And they heard we was in town and just dropped by the studio. So then it just turned into a jam session.
What a jam session.
Well, I kidded Sam later. You know, we didn't think about any of the things back then ever going to be important. But years later, when it got to be history and one of the most famous recording sessions in the world, I kidded Sam. I said, if you had been really smart, you'd have had the photographer to pan over about 4 more feet. I would have been it, and it would have been famous.
Fluke, man, I could talk to you the whole show.
Well,
someday we'll do it.
I want to tell you one thing I am doing before we go. Look here.
What you got?
Picture of the guy. We're doing Johnny Cash tribute shows.
Okay,
Frank
sure.
Hamilton, and we're all over the world doing that. Since the movie Walk the Line, people are wanting to hear Johnny Cash music again, and I got a couple of guys that sound like the Johnny Cash band. And click on our website, wsflukeholland.com, and keep up with it. We're going to keep it going as long as we can.
Okay, Fluker, thanks so much. Legendary drummer Fluke Holland, Memphis Sounds with GK. Take care, brother.